Part 4. The Meeting.
3 humans and 1 giant robot are flying through space in a stolen saucer.
The 4 of them left Yvalt a few hours ago, and are expected to arrive in Sector 6 after a day of travel. A few basic amenities had been propped up in the saucer for the journey, given the length that they'd be in space.
You should of course recognize Camille, Ellie, and Julian. We've seen them quite a bit by now. However, the 4th member of this little crew is one that's only been referenced by others, albeit often. Let's finally meet the illustrious Emma, shall we?
Emma is a human, arguably the most familiar human you've seen so far, not being a clone from a destroyed homeworld.
Granted, her homeworld's not doing so hot, but hey, it's not destroyed.
She's an older woman, one that has aged gracefully, fading brown hairs being replaced with her natural blonde, perfectly coiffed into a big swoop down the side of her face. She's sharply dressed in a well-made suit, lined with body armor after decades of dangerous life. Emma, for her journey into space, currently is wearing the lower half of a bionic exoskeleton to aid in her walking.
Under normal circumstances, she'd either be seated in a wheelchair or riding around in a robotic chair. Since they don't have rails in this godforsaken backwater, walking is uncomfortable, but a necessary evil that's alleviated by the exoskeleton.
She holds herself in an air of elegance and veiled superiority that's evident to all but the most thick-headed of individuals.
Individuals such as Camille, who sees very little difference between herself and Emma, or herself and Julian for that matter, despite both making it fairly clear that she, and pretty much anyone else, are just a means to an end first, and maybe a friend second.
Probably 4th or 5th in Emma's case. She looks down on pretty much everyone as beneath her, tools to be used, with few being equals in her eyes.
Of course, now she's in her element. She's the one giving orders, the one who has the power. They're here because of her, and she needs them, but they could have been anyone. The fact that she knows these people simply makes them more reliable to her. She knows what they can do, and she likes that.
Okay, you get the picture. She's a plotting misanthropist, and proud of it.
Now, as you have received with your briefing notes, we are going to the planet of Etho, a miserably barren world that's barely dragged itself out of the industrial age. After half a century of war, the planet is primarily under one government, although the strength and stability of that government remains in question.
Emma, with all eyes firmly on her, continues.
Tomorrow we'll be meeting with a representative from a local corporation, Hess Industries. They supply a large amount of construction and industrial equipment and materials for the planet. We need to ensure that they'll agree to the contract with Yvalt. We're unlikely to find another company in such a perfect position.
And what about them makes this the ideal choice? Surely there are a dozen companies you could contract out.
Ellie nodded in agreement and waited for Emma's response.
Camille nodded at Ellie, agreeing that Ellie knew what Julian was talking about. Emma rolled her eyes at this minor of annoyances. It was never enough that she had done the planning, the research, plotted everything out to the letter. Everyone always needed to know why.
Hess Industries is a large company for a planet, but one that hasn't broken free of its own gravity well. We both stand in a unique position here. Us, having outdated equipment and hardware that could jumpstart them by another 50 years conservatively, and them being largely unimpeded by local factors, but with little room for local growth. Any other corporation, especially interstellar ones, won't be so keen on doing business with a relative unknown. especially without valuable collateral that they can use or sell.
It is hard to start a new interstellar faction, especially without recognition or an established home planet, so making smaller allies and connections with those who are local powers becomes more important, and sometimes those allies might not have the best of reputations.
Emma continues. Be warned, as Hess Industries are rumored to have connections with local crime families.
Ellie taps away at her tablet, and Julian speaks up.
Ellie asks, "How connected?"
If my research turned up this much, from light years away, then we can safely assume that there is certainly truth to these rumors. They are unlikely to try anything with a potential business partner, but it's best that we take every precaution. Weapons and body armor have been provided and prepped for our use.
Oh, joy. Our lives depend on a bunch of mobsters' words.
I would rather deal with a mafia family than a corporatocracy. The greed in men's hearts can only take you so far, and the more layers between you and them, the less human you become. I'd rather a gun I can see or predict than become a number on a spreadsheet, ready to be crossed out when a better number outpaces you.
Julian looks over at Camille. Camille gestures towards him. Julian mocks a sigh.
Sigh. Camille thinks you could use a vacation. You sound rather jaded.
He looks back at Camille, who gives an uncharacteristic scowl.
Her actual words were, "You sound stressed." I changed it to jaded.
Camille gives a satisfied smile and a nod of her head. Now that is Camille approved. Thank you for your concern, Camille and Julian, but I am more than comfortable. This negotiation's child's play compared to what I did in my youth.
With that ominous response out of the way, Emma turns and leaves the command room to go and re-inspect half a dozen parts of the small ship and likely reaffirm that they have all of the equipment they're going to need, or at least she thinks they're going to need. The other three just sorta watch her leave. It's not like she's going to be out of eyesight for long. The ship isn't that big, and they're kind of in the middle of it.
For Emma, talking to most people is tiring, an exercise she keeps up with out of necessity. Despite how much easier it would be to simply order people around and rely that she certainly accounted for everything.
She, of course, has accounted for everything. Should the negotiations come to blows, they could always fight their way out. Once safely out of range, transmit a message to the planetary government revealing everything she knows.
Maybe they'll be willing to negotiate. Or just maybe it will cause the stability of the planet to collapse in on itself.
In the end, either Drak gets a trading partner, or they know for certain that Etho isn't a good match. Now, a cloaked ship is, by definition, difficult to spot, at least from a distance. To most cameras, the distortion the cloaking causes would be attributed to a smudged lens, an insect, or even some digital artifact.
To the naked eye, you know those mirages you see on a particularly hot day? The subtle distortion in the air? Yeah, it looks like that, but like way up high.
Camille brings the saucer down in a dry field nearby to their meeting site. The cloak isn't as effective at close range. The distortion is far too imprecise to obscure it when placed amongst foliage, stones, and buildings, so large, empty spaces are preferable for landings. Leaving the ship, Emma, Camille, Ellie, and Julian, all wearing at least the minimum amount of body armor, and carrying weapons both overt and concealed. Julian's weapon, a retrofitted and modified laser drill, is the most obvious, and he hasn't made any attempts to disguise this tool. He himself is a scary mechanical menace, so it won't take people long to recognize him as a threat.
The meeting site agreed upon by both parties was to be a small truck stop, nondescript and isolated far enough that the government wouldn't notice the extraterrestrial visitors.
Emma was willing to bet that every member of that truck stop was involved with Hess and their criminal associates.
Stepping onto the street, she could see that there was already a full convoy of cars waiting at this truck stop in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it looks like their potential business partners are already here, and waiting for them.
Emma naturally takes the lead, looking like some sort of crazy Men in Black member stepping out of a field wearing a fancy suit. It was possible to misconstrue her for a lost businesswoman, if not for the exoskeleton along the lower half of her body.
Nor for the large robot stomping behind her.
Her strange sudden appearance certainly drew attention from those waiting outside, and without needing to say a word, Emma is directed inside for their meeting.
Julian, however, is stopped at the door.
I'm sorry, ma'am, you're a big guy. Well, they can't fit through the door.
I can assure you that I can fit through the door. I would be more worried about your low-hanging ceiling lamps. Emma, I'll wait out here and communicate virtually.
Perhaps wait behind the building, lest you cause a sleep-deprived trucker to crash. Camille gives Julian a wave as he disappears out of sight and takes up her position on Emma's flank. Emma strides with purpose across the room, exoskeletal actuators hissing with each step, stopping only when a similarly well-dressed figure steps out of a booth to meet her.
Hello, you must be Emma, I take it.
Yes, and these are my associates, Ellie and Camille. They're nonverbal and communicate electronically. Our last associate, Julian, is just outside and will similarly speak electronically.
Excellent. Please, have a seat. I'm eager to discuss matters with you. My name is Ardwin Giles. I negotiate for Hess Industries' business interests. Ardwin Giles is a large man, stocky, with a ruddy face and mirthful smile. His head is clean-shaven, he's smartly dressed in a light blue tweed suit.
An odd choice, Emma thinks, given the generally warm weather outside. He doesn't seem to be armed, but Emma has noticed that a number of the other denizens of this truck stop are carrying concealed weapons, and the few employees seem more preoccupied with topping up coffees than cooking any lunch orders.
The initial negotiations are bland and uninteresting, re-establishing the basic information that both are aware of, reintroducing the interests both represent.
It sure is one of the worst conversations Camille has ever sat through. And that includes a one-sided lecture by Julian about the properties of special relativity as they pertain to the saucer on their way to Yvalt.
Things pick up once the general facts are established and real negotiations can be brought up. Ardwin is receptive to receiving their equipment in exchange for manufacturing contracts.
From what Emma has picked up, it would seem that Hess Industries has reached a stagnation of late. So it would really seem that both parties have a lot to gain from this deal.
But nothing is ever quite so simple. Now you understand that my employers want to make this relationship work, but it all seems very convenient.
Understandable. You've been contacted by an unknown woman who claims to be from another planet, who is willing to trade you advanced technology in exchange for steel girders and concrete. You have every right to be skeptical, but I will tell you that I make it my business to be informed of things that would be mutually beneficial.
Which is why you contacted us, then.
When I was sure you could provide what we needed, and might be receptive to what we were offering. You made the top of the list.
I've read the list. It's quite thorough. As have I. You'd be surprised just how many were axed in the first round for not being up to her standards.
Julian interjected dryly. Arvin looks between the speaker Emma had set down and then back to her with a smile.
I'm glad to hear it. But business deals are built on more than flattery. They require trust between both parties to work, and Hess Industries is no different. Normally, trust can be bought and bonded. Several grand held as collateral until the contract can be fulfilled. But being from space,
We don't have any usable money to offer. And I doubt you take credit.
you are sadly correct, my friend. But we would not ask you to put up first payment as your collateral.
And what do you have in mind?
Here on Etho, partnerships were often forged in fire and conflict. The same principles can apply to business deals.
A quid pro quo. We do a favor for you to prove that we're trustworthy.
Precisely.
Ardwin glances at some of the other people at the truck stop and casually folds his hands at the table.
Now, I don't know how informed you are about life on Etho, but not every partnership is strictly
Legal? Yes, we are aware of your rumored involvement. It may have played a part in our decision to contact you specifically.
Ardwin is somewhat taken aback by this exceptionally candid response. He hadn't expected them to be so willing to get involved with organized crime, and yet here they are. It doesn't last long, he's a professional. He recovers quickly. One of our business partners, a very powerful partner, could use a hand with persuading a potential associate to side with them over a rival organization.
Persuading? How?
No harm will come to our mutual interest.
Ardwin pauses, taking in the neutral and stoic reactions.
The rival organization members, however,
I take it we're expected to kill them.
dealt with as needed.
I'm sure you'll find your share, Julian.
Oh, I can't wait.
Is that all?
Aside from ensuring our would-be partner's safety, and that he leaves with a positive outlook of our friends, you'll be working alongside them. If they like you and trust you, we'll have a shipment ready for pickup by next week.
Emma contemplates this offer. Although she's already made up her mind, it's important to maintain appearances.
They are equals here.
Over-eagerness could be an exploitable weakness. Camille and Ellie seem somewhat hesitant, but otherwise aren't arguing against it. They aren't keen on violence, except in self-defense.
Julian, of course, is more than happy to help if it means exercising his killing functionality again.
I would like to hear more about this plan before we begin. The who, where, when, and how. But consider us very interested.